Living Single. It is said to be one of the greatest black sitcoms of all time. A show about 4 beautiful black women and 2 guys who all live in New York, and they try to get on with their lives whilst dealing with life's obstacles from the group, and all chaos ensues. At the time of its broadcast on TV, there were just a handful of black sitcoms on TV like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, Martin. We had just seen the last of The Cosby Show in a different world. All of these sitcoms were different and unique when making comparisons with each other, and Living Single was no different. Prior to it being on the air, there was no other show like it. Interchangeable scenarios involving the 6 main characters with 2 main apartments as their main base of operation, whilst inserting other places over the course of the show. The main characters: Khadijah, an up-and-coming magazine publisher; her cousin Sinclair, an aspiring actress; childhood friend Regine, sassy and bougie with a hankering for wigs and fashion; college roommate Maxine Shaw, who is a successful attorney, and she does not mince her words.
Oh, it's just you. Don't you ever go home?
Good to see you too, girl. Where you going? Carnival?
And then you have the 2 neighbours, Handyman Overton and stockbroker Carl Barker. All different and unique personalities, so you had all the ingredients for a very successful show. I grew up on plenty of legendary sitcoms from the 90s, but Living Single was not one of them. How is that, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. I grew up in Nigeria, and then I moved over to the UK, and there were certain sitcoms that I just did not have access to. Shows like Martin and In Living Colour for some reason weren't showed over here. You had the main shows like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Sister, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, who was shown regularly over here, but for some reason not Living Single. I had been aware for years that Queen Latifah had her own sitcom, and I would often see pics on the internet with the Living Single cast. Of the group, Erica Alexander was the only one I was familiar with due to her time spent on The Cosby Show. I did not recognize Kim Fields as Tootie because I didn't really grow up watching Facts of Life. But thanks to modern advances in technology with the streaming services like Hulu, Netflix and Amazon Prime, I was finally able to get my hands on the show, and I had the privilege of binging the entire series. Even though I watched this series decades after it had gone off the air, I watched it with the same sense of fun that I did as other classic shows, and it felt like I'd been transported right back to the 1990s. The various relationships in the show played a key factor in the show's success. The constant back and forth between Carl and Max, the sister-like friendship between Khadijah and Regine. Even though they were childhood besties, they always seemed to cuss each other out.
Hold up. A date is not gonna make Sinclair's life any better.
Now, Khadijah, just because you ain't getting any don't mean your whole family has to go without.
Just because I'm not giving it away with a double coupon don't mean I don't get smart.
And my favourite dynamic in the show, the love story between Overton and Sinclair. From the very first episode, Overton hatches his plan to win Sinclair over, and she does seem rather receptive to his advances. Then it was one scheme after another, including a mistletoe kiss.
I got you now, girl.
And after she nearly lost him to Cree Summers, the 2 finally got together. What's impressive about this was that they would remain a couple up until the very end of the show, which is very impressive and quite heartwarming for someone like me who's just a good old-fashioned romantic. God bless them both. I also enjoyed the back and forth with Max and Regine. They were like oil and water. They just never went together. Kyle was a confident, successful stockbroker who fancied himself as a bit of a ladies' man. I've already mentioned the back and forth with him and Maxine, which led to an on and off relationship which was an ongoing story arc throughout the whole run of the show. At one point, Kyle even managed to date Regine, briefly. I felt initially he was an over-the-top chauvinist, but as the show went on, we saw that there were deeper layers to Kyle. He had a deep sense of loyalty towards his friends, He was very staunch in his African American beliefs, and he was a huge advocate for jazz music. I mean, the brother could sing. Maxine was the maverick of the group, just marching to the beat of her own drum, an intelligent, strong-willed woman with a razor-sharp tongue, who ended up being a very successful lawyer. But yet somehow she spent more time at Khadijah's apartment, lounging around and just eating her food, much to Regine's annoyance. Regine, well, she was a standout too. She was all about the fashion, the wigs, and she took the whole term bougie to a whole new level, constantly trying to find companionship but in the wrong places. Hence the countless men that she appeared with throughout the show's run. As the show goes on, we begin to look at the full picture of Regine, and we can see her as somebody who is very confident and sassy, but very insecure. But in the end, she does get both her dream job and her man. Overton is the handyman of the building. He at times baffles you with some of the things he says.
Obi, what's this?
My practice bird. Do not take the honor of carving the Thanksgiving turkey lightly. It's man against beast.
He's scared of clowns, for crying out loud.
Clown. Is anybody sick? Clown. Clown.
Give me that now.
At his core, he is a good dude with a great bond with Kyle, whilst looking for love, which he duly gets in the form of Sinclair. Speaking of Sinclair, when you first meet her, she can be described as ditzy, bubbly, naive, but kind. She has quite the montage of dialogue, including her very famous
Woo woo woo, woo woo woo, woo woo woo.
And finally, there is Khadijah. It's funny to me because even though she was the most famous of the group, her character to me, whilst fun and inspiring, is the least interesting. Not that I don't enjoy her character, because I really do. But if I were to rank all the characters, she'd probably be towards the bottom. It just goes to show what a strong cast of characters this group was. She was the glue that held it all together. She epitomized what it meant to be a hard-working black woman in New York City. She wasn't the kind to be working for other people and taking orders, so she had her own business, the fantastically named Flavor magazine. She too is looking for love, and after hooking up with a few guys and engaging in a few entanglements, sorry Jada, she finds her beau and childhood friend Scooter, or Terrence. But as this goes through many trials and tribulations, including long distance and failed proposals and eventual breakups, it all comes back full circle. There are two bones of contention for me as far as this show goes. First is the departure of T.C. Carson as Carl Barker. I won't dive too deep into that story, but as it goes, T.C. was the spokesperson for the cast, and there were many issues that came up with how unhappy that the show was being perceived by them. And he would air it out with the producers of the show, and over time this led to tensions between the two parties, and ultimately he was written out of the show during season 5. He was replaced by Mel Jackson, but he would later return for the final episode. The second is the very infamous comparison with Friends. You only have to search online for Friends versus Living Single to know exactly what I am talking about, as well as comments from the stars with their take on the situation.
And was it true that Living Single was supposed to be named Friends?
Yes. Well, we were called My Girl, and one of the executives had a whole list of names, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and he read them out: Living Single, Friends, blah, 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 blah. And they chose Living Single for us, and then the next year, they created Friends.
Well, we were getting less than. We were getting less than all the way around. And then they created Friends and gave them everything. And both shows were Warner Brothers shows on Warner Brothers lots.
Yeah.
You know, so to watch that, to be on our lot and to watch that was really kind of a slap in the face.
I talked all kind of stuff. I was just mad. It was us. It was like our idea, you know. So you're mad, you know, because you're not getting any credit for it. And nowadays, you know, people talk about, oh, what a great show that was, and it was like it was based on ours. You know, we don't get that type of credit. So
Friends came out. Did you think, wait a minute, we've already been doing this? No, we knew we had already been doing that. You know, it was one of those things where it was a guy called Warren Littlefield that used to run NBC, and he said, you know, they asked him when all the new shows came out. They said, could you, if there's any show you could have, which one would it be? And he said, Living Single.
Wow, and he did the white version.
And he created Friends.
Erica Alexander had publicly called out David Schwimmer after he said in an interview that there should be a Friends reboot with an all-black and Asian cast. He duly apologized in a very well-worded statement. Personally, I love Friends. It was one of those 90s shows that I grew up on. Still enjoy the show to this very day, but upon learning of its origins, it unfortunately for me has now been tainted. There's nothing wrong with doing shows of a similar ilk. I mean, it's always been done, it's nothing really new. But in this instance, it would have been nice if Friends, for all the success it's had, for them to publicly acknowledge Living Single for paving the way. Now, the negatives aside, this show still holds up very well, and the characters and their traits are very relatable. In this particular episode, Kyle is making a new business proposal to his bosses, which they appear to like. However, Kyle is led to believe that his hairstyle would prevent him from being successful, and unfortunately this was said by another black man. Turns out his bosses were completely fine with it, so Kyle didn't have to sacrifice his personal beliefs just to fit into the corporate world. This was a very profound lesson indeed. And in this particular episode, Khadija showed that running a business has its flaws. She was holding down a job as a nighttime security guard to make extra cash just to make ends meet. This led to some much needed counselling as it proved too much for her to cope with, and these are just two examples of how Living Single connected with its audience. Now, whilst the struggle in America is unfortunately very real, the show did a brilliant job of showing the positive side of working class black folk who were mainly successful, and it wasn't the usual trope of coming from the ghetto struggling to make ends meet. This was also balanced out with a good mix of valuable life lessons and brilliantly scripted humour. As this show wasn't one that I grew up with, I can't speak of it in the same vein as I would a Sister Sister or a Cosby Show. However, given its great writing and appeal, generations of fans have watched it long after it was off the air, and this is one of those rare occasions that I fall into the category of the latter. The one huge benefit from this was I got to binge the whole show in its entirety instead of waiting for years upon years to do so. I loved the funny dialogue and the banter. I was a huge fan of the romance between Overton and Sinclair. Who knows, maybe one day I'll find my own Sinclair. Max's barbs between Kyle and Regine were always funny to watch.
Regine, you have been cooing over that doll all day. Now you put it away or it loses a limb.
She's just jealous because the only thing on the market that she resembles is a multi-strand floor mop.
And Queen Latifah was quite the presence on screen and really held her own. Even though I didn't watch it in the 1990s, I can honestly say Living Single has jumped into my top 10 of favourite sitcoms of all time.